issues. She's lurking in the chat.
We are live.
We are live. Okay, thank you. Welcome to Tell Me Something I Don't Know. This is our second online event. I was just explaining to everyone that I would hope that it would get less scary doing it online, more, but it doesn't get less scary. It's just weird. But anyway, myself and Jade and Ahmed are at primary. We are in the building, which we weren't last time we did this, which is good. It feels like progress. Thank you all the speakers for joining us tonight from South Africa and as well as Nottingham. Ahmed's come over to primary from Birmingham today. Hi, Ahmed. Henry's in Nottingham, Kim and Hugh are in Nottingham as well, different parts of Nottingham. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. Made you look from South Africa. Again, just to say thank you for joining us. We, as usual, we have a set of talks, 15 minutes each, and we're going to just kind of go. We've got Emily in the chat. So if we need to share resources and links, if you put them in the chat on Zoom speakers, then I can send them to Emily, and she can share them onto the chat publicly. And any questions will come to us that way as well. So I'm going to start off by asking Henry if he'll be our first speaker, because Henry, I think you're going to give us a bit of an update about what you've been up to at All Souls down the road from us. Yeah? Do you want to go?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. First of all, let me say thank you so much for inviting me in. My name is Henry, as you all heard. Chef at Soap Food Cafe, and also a coordinator manager, let me put it that way, at All Souls Community Center. So I have been engaging in lots of community work, particularly during this COVID time, and I've done lots of activities in terms of food palliative, trying to work together with primary and Nottingham City Council, Fair Share Food, and other organization, NGO like Mujatu, stuff like that. And why we were told why some people were locked down or some are not allowed, vulnerable to the COVID-19. So one of the people that put my life online and said, well, there are people there that need the help, that we need to help in terms of poverty, particularly hunger, and more so people who lost their job or who they couldn't go to work due to COVID-19. Myself and my team, we've been on the front line in terms of feeding people who are desperately in need. Primary been supported, giving us every week. It was twice in a week sometimes before I couldn't cope when the pressure was too high. So then I had to rearrange the program to once in a week because the number was just kept going up and up and up. Then I have to arrange with Becky. Becky is not yet today. Say, well, I think we have to manage these things, put it on every week, and it makes people to get more rather than doing it twice. And that's not even the point. The point is life experience I share with people. That's what I want to talk today about during this COVID. At first, as part of my own experience, I never understand when they say people are depressed. Personally, I take it for granted. How can you be depressed? Not until I went for the training and I sat down there, I saw a video And I start putting things together and putting imagination together and start coming to reality to me until I now physically see during this food parcel program. I have lots of people with different story, with different background, very sad. And on the outside, people think, oh, United Kingdom, it's a great country. Yes, it is. Personally, I appreciate for what we have. But no matter how we can never have it all. But these little things that I believe that we can tackle, that government need to do it. They are doing it, but just the direction they are getting it, the process to get that help, worsen things, making things go wrong. And I understand it's due to cutting of funding, due to cutting of jobs where there are people that are supposed to do that certain job. So what I'm going to share with you today without wasting much of your time is I met a family that have immigration issue during this COVID-19. Every time I had a WhatsApp program, he always sent a message and say, Henry, you have fed my family today. I always ignore that message. Henry, you have fed my family. You don't know what it's like to have a food on the table. Then one day I pick up the phone and I call her and I say, you know, you can always send me a message privately rather than putting it on the WhatsApp group. And she burst into cry. Why? I need to let people know what you are doing, that it touched her heart. Then I say, okay, what exactly you need or anything like that? She said, well, what else can I ask you? Things I don't ask you, you give me. I said, well, I'd rather give you rather than throw in the trash. I'd rather let someone have it rather than putting it in the trash. And this is supposed, it's a private conversation because there's a limit I can go, you know, in terms of that. Then there's a little boy. It's not a big boy. I think it's about 19. Also, he came. He's an immigrant, but he brought into the country with a mom when he was age 3. And he says he never know a mom. Like, okay. He was 3 when a mom died in the house, and 3 days after, he cried. 3 days after the door was open. Then I said, you were 3. How do you know this story? I said, well, that is the story my foster parent told me. So what do you do? Well, I came, he said he came to volunteer. I said, you came to volunteer? He said, yes. He said, because every time his life story touched him, and he's always wanted to, excuse me, please, I forgot to put this on silent. I'm sorry. And he said he came to volunteer to help people. And also I said, well, that's fine. You are welcome. Anything you want, feel free to take it because we are a team now. That's another story of that. You know, there's a limit you can ask questions because you don't want people to go back to what in the past that's going to start bringing the tears in their eyes. Then I start thinking on my own, if it's not this COVID or if it's not this food program, or supposing it's COVID and this program is not there, how would you have survived? Like the other woman, how would she have survived? Like somebody who doesn't have a house, like lots of all these homeless who don't have a house, don't have an address, receive phone calls, text messages, deliver food to some. Where's the address? He or she doesn't have an address. They're like, is it possible? in this country, in this West UK of today, that somebody will not have a place to sleep. That's why I said, I've had a lady that came to me and said, if you look, she dressed uniquely, beautiful, nice. She said she was just hungry. She just want to eat. If I have anything, I was asking her, do you have a stove? Can you cook? She said, no, just give me something. Immediately, I gave her some chocolate. She broke it and she put it in her mouth and she was shaking. She was shaking. And I said, what happened to you? Excuse me, do you take drugs? She said, no. Are you trying to embarrass me? I said, no, I'm sorry. Okay, what is it? She said she's not had a food since 2 days ago. How can you not have a food since 2 days ago? She was shaking seriously. I said, okay, I have enough food. Do you cook? She said, yes. Okay, I have to open the fridge, pack the food. I said, okay, go. Anytime you can have it. So each time I try to do a food parcel, I always make sure I get something in the fridge because people come to the community center every day to collect food. Every day to collect food. So, the issue of poverty, it is not just I can't pay my gas or I cannot pay my electricity or I don't have a clothes to wear. The first and foremost, it's how we're going to fill our tummy, which is the primary issue of the poverty that is going on in our community these days, particularly in Radford community. And I say this a lot in the immigrant community, where, we have different ethnic background and people from all these Romanian, at one point I like, you are EU. Well, what is the benefit being EU? That you struggle to eat. My job is to cater for people in need, not to interrogate. But because I care, I want to know a little bit about individual, not for personal purpose, so that I can share it to people who don't know things like that is happening. Things horrible is happening to people that you cannot even think of. Just like I said to you guys earlier, that I never believed in depression. And I realized going hunger can lead you into depression. Not having a food to eat can cause a lot of things in life. Then you say, oh, I live in a wealthy country. Well, we have people who have problem managing their funds or managing their benefit. I used to think, oh, they are taking advantage of the government, but they are not. They could have a health issue, mental health issue. They could have some kind of physical disability issue that is beyond their capacity to manage, because they are, particularly people like autistics. I've met so many people during this full parcel. I've met so many people, female, men, elderly, older people, to deliver to, and I even asking me, oh, thank you for bringing this food. Can you cook it for me? Oh, cook it for you. I'm sorry, I can't cook it for you. I have to go. Oh, if you don't cook it for me, I'm going to eat it raw. I thought, no, you are joking. I have to go. You are joking. Obviously, I cannot witness that. If he doesn't eat it raw, but I said, no, I have to go. I'm not allowed to get in your house. I have to go. And I say, next time, if you know you can't cook, don't say, oh, you want something that is cooked, So above all, I want to say big thank you to Primary once again, and big thank you to Breaking Barriers. They are another team of mine. They've been helping. Breaking Barriers work with youth. They're like youth worker. So they've been supporting and strongly, if anybody knows them, they're breaking barriers and building bridges. They also have office in also is community center there. That team is led by, I think, Maxine and then Miriam, and some others like that. I've been doing fantastic. So Ahmed, it's a friend, it's a brother, and I got to know Ahmed from my own ethnic group, which is the Yoruba community. It's one of the largest community in West Africa. We have our own community group here in Nottingham. And Ahmed also have an immigration issue. So unfortunate that I had to go and visit him when he was locked down at the detention camp. Like I said, we are human beings, but some people use their position to make money. Some people use their position to help others. Some people use their position to live a fair society or to make society to be fair to everyone. But some people don't see it like that. Some people believe if yours is not the other way around, mine is not going to be the positive way. Some people believe when it is negative for you, that is when it's going to be positive for me. And at the end of the day, we will continue to campaign. We want to live a fair society. I'm afraid I don't have much to say. I might not read up to my 15 minutes, but regardless, I believe you all learned something from my experience that I've shared with you.
We always learn something. We always learn something from you, Henry. Thank you. Did you want to just update us on the? I know you were planning to reopen the cafe.
Yeah,
is that still happening?
Yeah, right. I just came back from Germany today, and unfortunately, for my team, for the people, I call them my customer, my grants and the government funds and the support we've been getting this week, Friday, is going to be the end of the food parcel. And I've been pushing hard before I left for holiday to get additional funding to support. Regardless, if that don't come true, I'm putting plans in place to reopen the cafe, which Rebecca used to patronize, the people from primary used to come. So this is where you come, you have a lunch. Full course may only cost £2.50. Not the money. We use the money to roll over the cooking and the supply we do get from fair share because we pay towards the fair supply. And definitely I've been talking with Becky and some other group. We want to make it a little bit more activity, lively in terms of where we want to try and have some additional gift or stuff in each corner whereby you come, you might see some clothing or some sanitizer, sanitaries or toiletry stuff that you lack of. This is because of the experience we have all seen during this COVID, so that people will pick whatever they need. So after having the meal, but definitely you have to pay for the meal. But if you don't have the money to pay, it's £2.50. We cannot force anybody to do that. So tomorrow, myself and my team, we're going to sit down together and agree when we're going to go live on that. And I will let primary know about it. And I will also let everybody, I will try my best to put it, to advertise it so that you can come and see what is happening. It's also community centers located at Easton Road at the junction of Lenton Boulevard by Easton Road. If you're going from town, it's on the left. If you're going towards town, it's on the right. And we also have a Facebook, which is also, Soul Food Cafe. So I will put that there as well. And
We'll share the links, Henry. Emily's going to share the links in the YouTube channel. So if people want to find out a bit more about Soul Food Cafe, Break Barriers, and your Facebook, then we'll put that in so people watching on YouTube can see them. So we'll do that for you now.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you. And you kind of started to introduce Ahmed just before you gave us the update. Do you want to just hand over?
Well, I introduced Ahmed to Rebecca to primary. I just thought, well, Ahmed I told him not, do not underestimate where opportunity is going to come from. Regardless, you have to, if you don't make a step, you will never think of making the next one. So that's why Ahmed is here to share his own side of story. There are many stories out there. So that's Ahmed.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you, Henry. I know you're going to hang around a bit, but I know you have to go. So
no, I'm still here.
Okay, cool. So
I just got church meeting at
So well, if I don't speak to you again, then thank you before you go. Ahmed, do you want to? Or if anyone has any questions for Henry whilst he's still here, please feel free to put them in the YouTube chat, which Emily is filling up with useful links at the minute. And if no one has any questions for Henry, I can't see any popping up. Then Ahmed, do you want to start? Thank you, Henry, for introducing Ahmed. And yes, as Henry says, Henry did a talk a while ago when you hosted this talk series in person at Soul Food, which was fantastic. And then we were talking again, and I said, "Is anyone else you think of who would like to do a talk?" And you said, "Yeah, I know someone." And then I chatted to Ahmed. So yeah, Ahmed, do you want to? It feels a bit weird that you're down the corridor from me, a few rooms away. But anyway, do you want to? If you want to unmute your mic, then you can start going. I'm not sure. I think we might need to come.
You have to unmute yourself, Ahmed.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Ahmed.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Ahmed Afolabi. I was happy when Henry told me if I should participate in the talk shows, the primary. And I was happy when Rebecca got in touch with me. So I was eager to come to be part of this program. Yeah, like I just mentioned in his tribute to what he has been doing. I think my own experience, like I want to share with everyone tonight, is about my bitter experience. Experience comes in different forms, good experience and bad experience. Many people, they can start well. Along the line, things can change because what is constant in life is changes. There's something you can't do about it. A proverb says, there is no standstill in nature. You either up there or you are done. When you are done, you struggle to get up. If you are up, you struggle not to get down. But all these things can happen without being prepared. It can knock at anybody's. My early life was somehow peaceful. I lost my parents at a very early age. I was told my father fought the Second World War in Burma. He had a medal. They showed me the medal when I was growing up. I was raised up by my aunt in Nigeria, from Nigerian West Africa. Though I was born into a Muslim family, but my aunt that tutored me, that raised me up, raised me as a Christian. And I was living, growing up, hopeful for a life better for me, better for others, better for the community at large. My adulthood was enjoyable. I was able to see the bright side of the future. I work hard. I finished my educations with a little help my aunt could raise me. I went up to Polytechnic, and I chose to be a businessman. And I was doing very well. And I got married early 80s, but that is the beginning, that is the turning point of my bitter experience about life. I married in Nigeria. We have 3 major tribes: Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo. The Hausas are diverse. They are in the northern part of the country. The Igbo, the Yoruba, which I belong, like areas just mentioned, were the largest. So predominantly people from the south of Nigerians are Christians, though we have Muslims among them. But the majority of the northern part of the Nigeria, they are Muslims. And they're so much engrossed with that religion's belief. And this has been a very major concern till today. That is the religion's bigotry, the religion differences. So one of the main problems we have in Nigeria is a religious conflict, political conflicts, and ethnic. All those cannot be equal to what is happening now. The religions has divided the nation. Well, when I choose to have a wife, I married from the northern part of the country. My wife is from Fulani descent. And because, like I earlier said, I was born to a Muslim family, but I was raised as a Christian. So when I met my woman, the parents were at loggerheads. They were against the relationship, all because I'm practicing Christianity. This was not happy for the lady, because where there is love, there shouldn't be any barrier. But we thought we could manage it and lay aside whatever might be the problems from our own side. So we got married, kids, we are living okay. We are doing on our own things, putting aside the opposition from our own family. So, like I said, being a businessman, I do travels. I comes to to UK since 2006. I buy things, I ship them to Nigeria, and everything was fine. My family okay, my children are living okay, everything was okay. But the beginning of my bitter experience started exactly January 2016, 2012. We were traveling to the northern part of the country. At Middle Belt, that is the boundary between the south and the north, we were attacked by Fulani herdsmen. These herdsmen, they are cattle rearers. They are very, very offensive. They are invaders. I don't know, probably it was predicted, or we ran 2 shares of e-log. We were abducted to the bush. It was a terrible. What I could recollect was it was like a movie. They stopped us, wielded offensive weapons at us with guns. We were thrown into the bush, mercilessly tortured, beaten. In the course of it, it's a very bitter experience. Every time it's always sad in my life. Most times I wish it was like a dream. But the dreams never faded off from my memory. The vigilantes and the villagers were the people that came to rescue us. But unfortunately, they met me alive. My wife was killed and my child. And that is the beginning. There were so many things happen after that I cannot explain in details. If I want to say it, the whole day I will take the whole of your days. My in-laws, the Fulanis, they use the advantage of the incident to bounce back on me. They want to avenge the death of their daughter. And we try to explain this was just unforeseen circumstances. They did not take it lightly with me. They felt, why should my wife die and my son and me be alive? I was threatening so many attempts over my life to get rid of me, and the police could not do anything. Each time I reported to police, Nigerian police being corrupt they are. So, and if you are not connected, highly connected or powerful, you're just wasting your time. All said and done, things were so difficult for me. Within that 2012 and 2013, my daughter, because I've lost one child, two of them, my daughter was diagnosed of leukemia. Having just lost my wife and a child, the problems were so severe for me. I became depressed. I have PTSD, the post-trauma of the attack that resulted in the death of my wife and child, and my daughter, 18 years old. So I was struggling. I sold everything just to make sure the young lady lived. But alas, she died. Having borrowed here and there because my business had suffered, I could not do anything. So there was threatening of my life from the family of my wife and so on. And people that had borrowed money to take care of the young lady, were after me. There was a lot of litigations to repay back some of my debts. So it was so hard for me. And it was then somebody advised me, well, I have to pick my life from the pieces. So because I was having my UK visa, I decided, let me look for green pastures just to save my life and to rebuild my life and the remaining children so that they can have a good life. So I traveled because I was chased. There was 2 times I received a threatening letter that I reported to the police. They could not do anything. And many things happen in Nigeria. People are killing anybody anyhow and nothing happens. So a lot of high-profile people have been killed. Attorney General of Nigeria was murdered in his own bedroom. Nothing happened. So how much more? So I came to UK in 2014, precisely May 16, 2014. Immediately I came, I wanted to make sure I go in the confinement of immigration laws. Somebody introduced me to a solicitor firm in London, Your Right Solicitors. I explained my situations. They collected my passport, they collected money from me up to a point. Having waited, I was so anxious to see things done so that I won't live illegally. And while my visa still valid, I didn't want to contradict immigration's. But unfortunately, I later realized the solicitor firm has been shut down by Solicitor Regulatory Council. My passport, my money got in. So I was living in fear till I was arrested in May and in November 2017 in Nottingham. I was first detained at Lincoln Detention Center. From there, I was transferred to Nottingham, spent a couple of months before I was transferred back to Hammersmith in London. I spent close to 8 months. When I was in detention, I explained my ordeals, I explained what my problems was, and the welfare department proposed I should claim asylum if I want to live in this country. I claimed asylum in December 2017 and did the interview, and I asked for proofs of evidences of what happened to me in Nigeria. And I sent for documents to back it up. In the documents are my birth certificate, the death certificate of my wife and my child, the letter from the vigilantes, so many things, my company's documents, a lot of important documents to showcase what happened to me in Nigeria to prove my case beyond reasonable doubt. And I indicated the document should be sent to me in detention or recorded delivery. And truly, it was sent to me and was received at Amasworth Detention Center. I waited to receive this document to support my asylum claim. When it was done on me and I couldn't lay hands on this document, I have to investigate. It was then I realized the document was received. And I have to complain to IMB. They refer me to the department that can be able to assist me in finding the lost document. It was after that I received that the decision has been made over my asylum claim, and I was received and certified. I became jittery. I didn't know what to do. So they asked me to seek for legal aid. I seek for legal aid. All the legal aids are saying I don't have a genuine case because I don't have proofs. And I told them these proofs are the document that I rely on that have been lost by the Home Office. And I received about 3 letters of apology from the Home Office, having explained how my document has been lost and the decision that was not favorable to me. Then I contested the decision. So I went to represent myself at Holborn for judicial review, and the judge granted me permission. And immediately I was released, because I was released the second day I went for my judicial review. I have no solicitor. I represented myself, and the judge gave me permission to review my case. And immediately I was released, the Home Office representative sent me an email and a consent form that the Home Secretary has been able to look into my case and promised to review and pay all my costs for judicial review. I was happy. And they indicated from the consent form that I should fill the consent form to settle out of court, then they can be able to look into my case and grant me my request. I was happy. I said, oh, the problem have finally come to an end. I never know it's going to be a long journey. I tried to contact people who had an experience about, the letter I received from some advised me it's a welcome idea. I filled the consent form that the case, I won't pursue the case any further. So far, so good. They are going to revise their decision. This I was waiting for. I sent the consent form. By January 29, 2019, I received a letter from the Home Office that they have refused to mine. I contacted the legal representative who wrote to me that he said, well, there's something they can do. That's how I started. And I was advised that I cannot do this thing alone unless I have a solicitor. Anytime solicitor that consult, they requested for money. Number one, I'm not allowed to work. I'm not allowed to have a house. I cannot rent a house. I cannot work. It's difficult for me. All the property that I left for 9 months, I couldn't lay out. So it was the help from people like Henry. Henry visited me several times in detention, assuring me, giving me support. So they advised me that I should, look for solicitor that can do pro bono for me. I contacted one solicitor, Fontaine solicitor in Warsaw. So they started the case. I think that was the time Henry followed me to the last appeal in one of the tribunals. I was so furious when my barrister allocated to me was talking to the representative from the Home Office, changing was. I was, look, I don't understand. I was still hoping that the decision would be favorable, but unfortunately, the decision came out again. The appeal had been exhausted, and I don't have the right to appeal. I was on this. I was so disturbed. And I've been on antidepressant medication for the past 3 years now. I'm on sertraline because I've been depressed. I'm on amlodipine and istropidine for high blood pressure. So coupled with every night, I became so worried. I couldn't sleep. It was Henry who has been telling me you can come for food. Most of the times he do a lot of assistance for me. So most of the times I do voluntary for them for when they are doing their food. So this I've been able to keep myself. And when the pandemic, the lockdown started in March, because I used to report at Lobro, the Home Office wrote to me that my reporting has been suspended for the time being. And where I was living in Nottingham with a family friend, he has about 4 children grown up. So there's no way we could, because of the social distancing, so they have to move from one friend's place to another cousin's place. You know, this I've been on it. So the problems is so overwhelming. But one thing I just people to learn from my experience is that when we are facing a lot of challenges, it is when we grow. When circumstances are at worst, it is when we need to face it with courage, dedication, endurance, and tolerance. That is where we find our best. Because most times I wonder why I didn't envisage this could have happened to me, because I didn't prepare this, when I was, bringing, raising up my life. And it's so terrible for me. No house, no means of what is going to happen to me for the next day. So I live. But what I think that is keeping me on at the moment is that I'm keeping my hope alive. I'm still keeping my hope alive. And that was the reason when Harry told me, yeah, you don't know when help should come. If you don't mind, the primary is doing running the programs, the talk care programs, you go there and experience. And I was very happy. And when I came to primary today, I need to thank them for the warm receptions given to me. Rebecca has been in contact with me for the past some weeks, and a very, very nice person. And when I came, showed me around, offered me warm hospitality. Thank the primary management or group. Thank you so much. And I just want people to know that challenges are bound to happen. Challenges is not something you prepared for. It comes like a lightning, but with endurance, tolerance, and dedications, and full courage to discipline yourself, it will keep you going. Committing suicide does not help you. You have to live and be strong. That is what is happening to me. You see me, I try to make myself happy and push aside all the challenges I'm facing. My challenges has got to a stage that I felt I should sleep and wake no more. But inside of me, with people around me, people that have been encouraging me, people that have been talking to me, most times as a believer, as a Christian, I'll pick my Bible, I'll read it. Most times I pray for people, pray for this nation, I pray for so many things, because I believe I cannot do more than I've done. And when things is like this, I need to just calm down. So I want to enjoy everybody listening to me. Keep your hope alive, whatever you might be passing through. It is not over, or it is over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. Well, first of all, just for coming here and wanting to share. I know that when we first spoke, we talked about kind of your motivation for wanting to talk. And when Henry first sort of suggested you felt like it was important that you shared. But also, I guess, thank you also for being so generous with us and you know, and sharing. I don't know if anybody wants to ask Ahmed any follow-up questions. I'm going to just keep an eye on the.
I just need to say something. You know, what actually made me to introduce Ahmed was when he started his story. He said, when you are in the top, you want to maintain that position because you don't want to come down. Or when you are below, you always want to work hard to go to the top. And this is somebody that said he was living fine, he was doing okay, you know, have a planned future for his family, and suddenly everything just gone.
Mm.
You know, I just like, he takes, let's say, okay, I want to buy a mortgage, I want to buy a house, I want to buy a car, I want to buy this. You plan towards that to achieve that. Do you know years that it takes to pull all what you have, all your materialistic stuff? It takes. Then putting your age on account, then suddenly everything gone. Then it's like, do I really want to go back to this again? Or do I really, that is when my knowledge of depression start coming.
Yes.
That's when I start thinking, oh yeah, it's true. People actually have depression. Because if anybody go through that, that is where my definition of depression.
Yes.
So that's all I just wanted to say. So that's Ahmed.
I would like to say that I think that with everything that's happening at the moment with Black Lives Matter, global protests, with COVID, with I guess like a very tense atmosphere within communities and spaces. I think that one of the questions that I find really important to ask is, how do we support each other? How do we protect each other? And I'm speaking about Black communities. How do we provide support? What does support mean? And I think this goes back to like both of the talks that came previously about support and kind of a collective effort to help each other and to provide solutions and also provide a space for healing, I think. And so I want to know from both Henry and Ahmed, what community for you provides you that support, that healing within Nottingham or within the kind of spaces that you're in? What for you really kind of is a great example of collaboration, of collectivity, of mutual support, mutual care, generosity? What for you is that?
Well, like I said to you, I belong to a Yoruba Community Association, Nottinghamshire, which is my ethnic background, myself and Ahmed. We are in Nottingham. We decided to come together to support one another, particularly people in a situation like Ahmed. But unfortunately, because due to, I'll say, lack of professionals within the community, within this association, so there's a limit we can do, one. Two, lack of funding. 3, and authority, the connectivity between ourselves to the authority, limit. Read this way, like you said, Black Lives Matter or Black's ethnic background, stuff like that. No matter how you try to climb the ladder, there's always still going to be the challenges that is going to be affected. But we are pushing hard to try and reach to the authority and see who can help. Obviously, we have took advantage of this COVID in terms of the food relative, which is what Soul Food Cafe was doing. I personally introduced that to the community, Yoruba communities, and said, well, we could reach to our community due to this. And why don't you come along? Let's do the same thing Soul Food Cafe is doing. So Yoruba community has been doing that as well, which is to support the other people. We have loads of people that have immigration issues. Loads of people who are low incomes, who are struggling, who don't have money to eat, stuff like that. So the support we get is within ourselves. So because we have to contribute XY amount together to support one another and see what we can do. And you know, even if you have a funding application, you try to apply for funding, it takes a credibility, you know, before the funding can be approved and this and that, you know. And like I said, we just keep going. That is why I thought, well, I mean, if the Yoruba community resources cannot get you where you need to be, let's speak out. Maybe support might come from outside, actually. So the support we give to each other is limited in terms of financial, well, moral support, we get that. You know, we call each other, like when he was in detention, I went to visit him. I drove all this way to Amarsworth just for him to know that, yeah, he got somebody, you know, he has somebody. So I didn't ask him, well, obviously, someone in detention is going to pay for my gas. No, you know, I have to support. And then when he came out, it was him because he had a threaten he's going to be deported several times. Well, that's it, really.
And what about you, Ahmed? What community for you? What is community to you? Who is that community for you?
Yeah, community belongs to the community, still give you a lot of hope. And for now, so many things are in limbo in my life. I don't have accommodations. I don't have a job. I cannot work. I cannot rent a house. So it's like staying aloof, staying, you know, in the surface. But the societies, the communities, Yoruba community, and also about whenever I come around, they still support me with food items, something that can, you know, live on. So though it's not enough, presently I need to push my case, you know, further. But I need a legal, you know, backing. But all these are lacking because no solicitor wants to take up a case without demanding their legal fees from you. So, and the COVID, pandemic is not helping things. People have been restrained. Families have been restrained. People are struggling. So, to get help, you know, from people, it has to be, you know, they have to skills from their little resources to be able to help. And because you cannot blame anybody, you cannot feel aggrieved, you cannot say they are not doing very well. You still have to appreciate any little thing that comes from people. You must have to appreciate because it is a common knowledge. It is a common knowledge that things are not really going fine at this moment to everybody, to family, to group. So those are the challenges. But I believe, like Area just said, help does not, permanent to a particular. Every time I'm reaching out, that is what brought me here today, and that is what inspired me to tell people, what I'm passing through. I'm happy to tell people my problems, so I don't need to stay back and feel, oh, no. So because I might not know, you start opening to people your problems, they can be able to see what they can do and the limits they can do, or whatever, how far they can go with you. So that is it.
Thank you for that. And I think that I'm so interested in like how we share care, how we share love between each other, how we are generous with not only our time but our skills. And it's that thing of like, communities, you need that different kind of support, if that's legal support, if that's knowing your rights, if that's being aware of what you can access. All those things are necessary, I think, for Black communities. You need access to mental health, you need access to healthcare, you need access to spaces to, I think that is like really important. I think that and I really sense that coming from what you both said, that actually that morale is important, but also practical support equally so, to help kind of build communities and build spaces and draw on the existing support that's there, but also see how you can build on that and really kind of engage with different practitioners that can kind of help you build that. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Now, just want to take an excuse that I might have to go because my next meeting starts in 3 minutes.
Thank you, Henry.
And I want to say I've enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I will looking forward to see you all in physical very soon.
We'll look forward to coming to the cafe.
With 6 meters distance. 6 meter distances. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
all.
Henry.
Thank
Yes,
you.
bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.
I'm going to suggest that we just take a kind of couple of minutes just to, I don't know, like get cups of tea, that kind of thing, if people need to do. And whilst people want to do that, I'm just going to kind of, if they need to kind of refresh, then I'm just going to mention that one of the reasons we're doing this talk now is that there's an exhibition at Primary celebrating Making Place, which is the three-year programme that we're just kind of coming out of here, of which Tell Me Something I Don't Know is part of. Jade will have to correct me if I get the dates and times wrong, but I think we're open on a Friday and Saturday. Is that right? Yeah, thank you. So please come down. We'll be asking people to go around in kind of small groups, so we might hold you back for a few minutes to wait if the space is full, and we do ask you that you kind of wear a face mask, and that we'll provide some place somewhere to sanitize your hands, that kind of thing, as you arrive. But please come down, and there's information about this project. There's the archive of recordings from this project, of which there are more than 60 talks now, but there's also there are artifacts and objects and information and zines and a film and projections and a really great soundtrack that kind of bring the whole project together and show you kind of the different kind of levels of things that have been going on, different projects relating to this program. So do that, and also if you like the the idea of Tell Me Something and you enjoy the format. The entire all the lights coming on. The entire archive for Tell Me Something is up on the primary SoundCloud page, so you can access that via the primary website as well. So if you're interested in hearing other talks, everything we've had, pretty much all the talks we've had have been recorded, so you can access those on SoundCloud. And this also will stay up tomorrow, from tomorrow, sorry, this talk. And just to mention that last time we tried live captioning, and the live captioner was it's not very good. It wasn't really making a lot of sense whilst trying to live caption people. So we will put this film will go back up again, and we will provide captions with it. So if anyone's watching and would prefer to access it in that way, we'll put information up about that as well. So that's the primary exhibition, the Tell Me Something I Don't Know archive, and the archive, and the fact we'll be having captions up with this film from tomorrow. I'm going to move on now. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to refresh, move about a bit. I should probably move about a bit too. I'm going to move on to Hugh now. Thanks everyone else who's waiting to speak. Hugh, did you want to kind of introduce what you're talking about? I get it relates to lockdown a little bit, I think.
Yeah, thanks Becca, thanks Jade, thanks Primary, and thanks everyone for having me. It's really nice to kind of contribute and be a part of this. And thank you also, Carmen and Henry, for presentations. And I find it kind of quite hard and difficult to know how to follow on from that. I should explain, so my name's Hugh. I'm currently an artist and I currently teach. And kind of at a time like this, it feels sort of strange speaking here when COVID is beginning to rise again, and when the government feels sort of violently incompetent, and when kind of inequalities feel really laid bare, and when they feel like there are so many sort of important things that could and should be said. But I guess instead, and despite, and perhaps because of this, I'm going to try and say something about birds, or at least something that begins by talking about birds, and which is something I'm very passionate about, and in particular something bird watchers call a life list. So life lists often begin in childhood. They're a sort of personal record to chart the different bird species seen during one's lifetime. Here, this is mine from when I was 6 years old. On the cover, there's a drawing here of a 5-legged giraffe. And inside, there is a diagram of a bird, which has been blocked in bright crayons. The bird's been given a kind of spiky haircut. It's like no bird ever existed. And beyond this, there's a list of species. And while life lists can be drawn up to cover different geographical areas, from one's local patch, as it's called, to one's home county, most often a life list maps the number of species seen within the borders of a certain country or nation state. So the UK list currently stands at 621 recorded species. First drawn up by the British Ornithological Union during the 1850s, the list reflects a certain kind of Victorian mentality to kind of collect and catalogue the world. Species from 1800 to the present are logged by strict taxonomy, standardized, their regional or folk names are eradicated. The list's most recent addition, yellow-bellied flycatcher, a bird commonly encountered flitting over Californian woodlands or across scrubby Mexican grasslands on its migration to Central or South America, was found only 2 weeks ago on a damp grey day in a quiet back garden in Tiree in Scotland. But how or why it came to be there, nobody really knows. Many species on the British list are relatively easy to see, a garden or resident species requiring specific habitats. But in order to amass a sizable life list, it's necessary to see what are called rarities. And rarities can occur anywhere and any time. Birds are pretty indifferent to wars, to financial depressions, to viral pandemics. And while there are sort of fated sites, like Clay or Fair Isle, Unst or Dungeness, the Isle of Portland or Selsey Bill. Rare species routinely pop up in everyday locations. A shy Tengemans owl shelters in a derelict Orkney toilet block. A wall creeper winters on the cliffs of Cheddar Gorge. A bright flurry of waxwing cluster in the car park of Sherwood Co-op. And these rarities are reported online, species, locations, times and dates. And the process of seeing or accumulating species to add to your like list attracts various sort of pejorative names like ticker, tally hunter, or twitcher to describe that kind of bodily urge to travel. Well, while there's no real money to be made in watching birds, there's often money spent. There are hours dedicated, miles driven. Sometimes people charter planes and abandon their jobs. And while bird watching cuts across class and can be quite communal, it can also be highly individualistic and competitive. Lee Evans, a Buckinghamshire-based twitcher, the current leader of the British rankings, runs a club for bird watchers with over 400 species on their British life lists. In 1997, Evans abandoned his wife before his own wedding reception, drive to Dorset to see an Isobline shrike, and they divorced 18 months later. For me, birds rarely look like they do in bird books. More often they appear as fuzzy silhouettes across a tidal estuary or flickers deep in briar and scrub. And it's these sort of flickers, these kind of glimpses, that are learnt by bird watchers throughout life. It's a little bit like learning a language of shapes and movements, colours and calls, of accents and inflections. And these distinctions are often very subtle or very slight. The differences between tree creeper and short-toed tree creeper, for example. Others are only really told apart by call, snippets of sound, perhaps a single lilting phrase. And learning these distinctions requires care and attention and time. And to those not interested, all this might seem kind of ridiculous. But for the birdwatcher, these differences are important. These differences really matter. During the 19th century, the best way to identify a bird was to shoot it. Testimony, or the so-called gentleman's record, was not enough. Dead specimens could be held, they could be measured, and they could be stuffed. Skins could be collected or traded. However, as reflected by the notorious Hastings rarity scandal, skins were not always proof enough. Between 1892 and 1930, George Bristow, a Hastings-based taxidermist and gunsmith, shot a series of rare and extraordinary birds, species never found in England before. Years later, in 1960, 29 of these species were struck from the British list. Bristow, it's believed, imported specimens from abroad to sell to wealthy upper-class ornithologists, such as Lord Rothschild, claiming they were from the Hastings area. From this scam, Bristow is estimated to have made about £7 grand, not an inconsiderable sum of money then or now. And today, 50 of these stuffed specimens sit glassy-eyed within Birmingham Museum. Their true provenances are unknown. But nowadays, it remains not really sufficient to allege sighting of a really rare bird, or it's unlikely if you're on your own. Certain sites become infamous. Flamborough Head in Yorkshire is nicknamed Flannelborough Head after the regularity of spurious reports. Instead, rarities require corroboration, fellow eye of a skilled birdwatcher. Field sketches also help, usually made in a notebook, drawn quickly to highlight key diagnostic features. A wing marking here, an eye stripe there. However, over the last decade, the privileged form of proof has become the digital photograph. Birds are now shot on cameras, telescopic lenses or scopes mounted on DSLR bodies. Multiple photos can be fired off in a flurry, quickly, be retrospectively reviewed, analysed, shared online. Such images circulate not just as means of verification, but as a means of capturing or owning. Finds, as they're called, become the property of individuals, and moments and memories become eclipsed or remade by the images themselves. And I often see birdwatchers looking down at camera display screens, discussing the spec of their new kit, rather than looking or watching or waiting. Such a mentality is reflected in the digital Swarovski digital guide, which retails for £2,000. A pair of binoculars that takes photographs, instantly transferring the images to a phone app designed to identify species from a vast image database. This amassing of lived knowledge is no longer so necessary. And I guess maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, but I think something for me is lost. Because I guess when really rare species do occur, perhaps once in a decade, perhaps once in a century, species sort of at the limits of language or recollection, these birds are often far off course, many thousands of miles from their familiar homes. They're lost, they're confused and frightened and vulnerable, and land is a refuge of sorts, a place of rest, away from wind and waves. And yet, of course, it's only temporary relief. It's most likely that these birds will never manage to return home. Most will die, probably somewhere quiet, nestled in some small nook between damp sedge and matted grass, perhaps to be eaten, or perhaps to fade into the soil. Birdwatchers like me never really talk about this, but sometimes I think about the obsessive life of the lister and the incessant travel required to encounter these birds in the last day of their life. The Lee Evanses of this world. And sometimes I think that in some strange way, the life list is something much more complicated altogether. The British list can't ever really be completed. To hold all 621 species in your life list is an impossible task, or certainly one that's impossible within a single human lifespan. As it stands, to have seen all 621, with a lone record of red-necked nightjar, shot in 1856 by a young keeper on Northumbrian moorland, the Tyree flycatcher of a couple of weeks ago, you would need to be turning 155 this year. Instead, for me, there are many species I've never seen, and many species deep down that I'll never see. I don't drive long distances, I don't twitch, and though I often carry binoculars around with me, deep in the bottom of my bag, I carry them in hope, probably more than anything else. But I find many of the names very beautiful in themselves. The ancient murrelet, the Siberian ruby-throat, the spiny needletail, or the Basra reed warbler. The names allow me to travel. And it's perhaps a little bit embarrassing, but a sign of a kind of unhealthy obsession. But very occasionally I dream about seeing rare birds. These birds never visit in deep, earthy sleep, but instead appear through thin, shallow dreams, somewhere between waking and sleeping. And in these dreams, I never encounter these creatures soaring over remote cliff tops or glittering creeks. But instead I see them in familiar, ordinary places I know very well. A blue-cheeked bee-eater flitting silently across the golden wheat field at the bottom of my childhood garden. A collared prating colt perching on the loose, sandy siding of the local train station. At other times, they take form as fantastical hybrids. A bright wing here, a fretted bill or curved talon there. These dream birds sort of surface like thoughts or possibilities, as if something else, something different, might be possible in this flat, grey transactional world of work and violence and money. And I know, as speaking here, that right now there are perhaps species just arriving, sort of falling out of the sky on this light southwesterly wind. The land here on this strange damp lump of rock on the edge of Europe, perhaps touching down only for a moment, not to be seen by anyone, only to vanish away once again.
Thanks, Hugh. Thank you for sharing that. I know, well, yeah, I know it's something you've been thinking over for a while. We've talked about you kind of sharing that topic for a while. Oh, there's a question come in from YouTube already. I also I will mention some of the comments from YouTube as well when we finish this section. Emily says, Hugh, why do you think people get so into birds and bird watching? Emily says she's been obsessed with the garden blackbird drama going on during lockdown.
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's a really good question. I started doing it probably because my dad was interested. And I used to get dragged on holidays where I got dragged around nature reserves looking at birds. But also I just like the way you don't have to go to a nature reserve to do it, and you can see them in your garden. Or it can be like the pied wagtails that all in winter gather outside the Victoria Centre in the trees out there. Or things can turn up wherever. There's or like the waxwing that show up in like Sherwood Co-op car park. And for me, that's something that's kind of constantly interesting or exciting. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions from in the Zoom chat? Oh, we've got another question on YouTube here. Oh, so Ben's just giving some context to the blackbird drama, because it's out of the window. It looks a bit like kind of TV watching, and yeah, I do the same with my back garden as well. Any other questions from within Zoom? If people want to ask you anything. Okay, I'm gonna thank you, Hugh, for sharing. I'm going to move on now to Made You Look, who are joining us. If you weren't on the beginning of the call, are joining us from South Africa. Again, we're really, really grateful for you doing that. Jay, we were going to introduce kind of how you have a connection to primary, because obviously that's something that hasn't really been shared so much. Jay, did you want to do that, or I can do that? Yeah, you happy to do that? Cool.
Yes. So I'm gonna hopefully, if technology is good, potentially share my screen, but I think my technology is not so good. So that probably won't be possible. So I'll start with so Made You Look are doing currently a residency with us, or will be doing a residency with us as part of the Here, There and Everywhere programme, which is a partnership between New Art Exchange and Primary, and it's a consortium of East Midlands and West Midlands, or actually generally UK arts organisations. And I've actually got a kind of bit of information about their talk, not their talk specifically, but about their project and their residency. So I'm going to read that out. Bear with me. So, as part of the Making Place programme, the South African Artists Collaborative Made You Look continues their ongoing interest in thinking through the powerful implications of Black urban gardening. Within the South African context, they have considered how personal gardens featured in the lives of ordinary Black people, particularly under the difficult circumstances of forced removals, migration, and the challenges of labour politics. For Making Place, Made You Look will develop a set of sound and video recordings featuring interviews with growers from Nottingham in order to think about the ways in which gardening has figured in processes of placemaking for African and Caribbean migrants, and how this has enabled a sense of rootedness and belonging. So that's a kind of overview of what they're doing with us. And I think also, hopefully, this talk is also about their kind of research practice, and their connection with primary, which is quite nice through the Making Place program, but another element of the Making Place program. And obviously Tell Me Something I Don't Know is also part of the program. So it's quite an interesting connection to bring an artist or a practitioner that we're working with in our public program into this more kind of informal events program. And I do also want to bring people's attention to our website, because recently I did an interview with Ian Nesbitt and Rebecca Lee about how different people shift within our program. So an artist then can become a participant in another element of our program. Viewers or audiences become participants, or participants become audiences, or it's quite a fluid process. And I think that's quite interesting, kind of that, you know, sometimes the pressure, I think, as an artist or practitioner to talk about your practice in the context of a program is interesting. But I think what's also interesting is what other knowledges do people have? What other practices do people want to bring to the table? I don't think that people are defined by their title per se. And I think this program is really interesting in how it kind of plays around with that, and everyone's an expert, everyone has a knowledge to share, and it's non-hierarchical, so no one's knowledge is considered better than someone else's. Everyone's knowledge is valued, and I'm quite interested in that as a model. So we did this kind of interview online, so please do check it out. And yeah, that's what I'd say.
Thank you. Thanks. That's brilliant. Yeah, to just contextualize and just to say it's Nare and Malemo. Is that right? Just yeah. Hmm?
Yes.
Yes. So I just want to give you names rather than just your collective as well. And yeah, so your talk's called also look at historicising Black love in South Africa. So yeah, the floor is yours.
And thank you, Rebecca, and thanks, Jade, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody else, for being so generous with your sharing. As Jade mentioned, we're actually going to be working on some of the work we've been doing over a number of years around gardening, when we, in the ways that we connect with primary. But today we thought we'd tell you about something else that you don't know, and share some of the kind of research-based work that we do. A lot of our work is very much interested in archives, very much interested in kind of thinking through histories of ordinary life. And so this project is, so what we're going to be sharing with you today comes from a project that we did some years ago called Corner Loving, and is a project about love. And in the process of researching for the project, we worked through a lot of archives to kind of source historical material that referenced love within the kind of South African context. And so we're going to be sharing some letters with you and also some archival footage with you. We're going to be throwing quite a lot of stuff your way, and know that it's probably all a bit foreign and a bit difficult to contextualize, but really just kind of sharing some of our own context and some of the history and space that we operate from, and our commitment to thinking about ordinary life as a really important place of knowledge making and knowledge sharing.
So as Malemo mentioned, we are going to share 3 texts from this project, Corner Loving, from a few years ago. We have 2 letters to share with you, and then the third text is an excerpt from a memoir by a writer and jazz pianist called Todd Majikiza. But first, before we go into that, the reason we'd like to share these texts and speak about love is because very often within the context of contemporary art, love can be sort of viewed in very frivolous like terms. But part of our practice is actually kind of giving seriousness to like everyday Black life. And as Malemo said, actually looking at it as something that generates knowledge. So what we'll do today is actually give you a little bit of context, because we know there's so much to take in within these 3 letters. So before we go into each letter, we'll give you a bit of context as to where it kind of figures in South Africa's history. Alongside that, we'll also play a video, which will give you some sort of like context as well. And then as that's happening, one of us will read one of the letters. So the first letter is by a migrant worker here in South Africa, which Melinda will give you context about.
Yeah, so the context of the first letter is that migrant history is very much part of South African history, and it's been really valuable to hear from Ahmed and Henry of kind of how these histories remain in kind of contemporary society and the challenges of this. In South Africa, migrant history is very much related to apartheid history, in that Black South Africans were forced to remain in rural areas and had to have a kind of passbook, like a passport, to travel to urban areas where they could find work. The rules of this kind of passbook process was that they were not allowed to bring their families with them. And because of this, generally migrant workers were very solitary, very alone, and away from the people who loved them and that they loved. And so this letter we're really just pulling a short excerpt from a letter from a migrant worker to his lover. And I will play you the video. And Nari will share the letter. This is not the right one.
I still think of how we loved each other. I think of how you behaved to me, my wife. I did not lack for anything that belonged to you. All things I did not buy, but I just got them, together with your body. You were too good to me, and you were very, very sweet. More than any other sweet things that I've ever had. We fitted together beautifully. There was nothing wrong. You carried me well. I was not too heavy for you, nor too light. Just as you were not too heavy for me, nor too light. And our bloods liked each other so much in our bodies. The following letter, well, the following text is an excerpt from a memoir, as I mentioned earlier, by a writer, jazz pianist, and composer, Todd Matshikiza. The memoir is called Chocolates for My Wife, and Todd Matshikiza became famous for composing a jazz musical called King Kong, which became a national sensation in South Africa, and this is happening in the 1960s. And once it became this national sensation, it then traveled internationally. And so it also became the launch pad for a lot of careers, such as that of Hugh Masekela and Miriam Makeba. Todd Matshikiza is part of an emerging Black intelligentsia in the 1960s that is associated with a very vibrant cultural hub here in Johannesburg, which is previously known as Sapphire Town. So this is the sort of context that he sort of fits within. He also is famed for writing for a publication here in South Africa, which is called Drum Magazine. Drum Magazine was one of the first magazines that actually focused on everyday Black township life. Instead of speaking to Black people in very like paternalistic sort of ways, they actually employed a lot of famed writers to kind of speak about the experience of being Black at the time. So the importance of this letter, of this excerpt, sorry, is that it actually kind of speaks to the operations of the state in everyday Black life at the time, from telling people where they could sit, where they could go to like the bathroom, which beach they could sit on, to actually even telling people how they could express their love for their wife. So what is happening in this excerpt is that Todd Matshikiza is actually coming back from a rehearsal for King Kong in the city. He is not allowed to be in the city as a Black person, and he will therefore have to have like a letter from his white employer or even from a white friend saying why he's in the city after curfew. So he's at the bus stop when police confront him, and this is the exchange that takes place.
One night, past midnight, I stood waiting for the bus, specially chartered to take everybody home after rehearsals. There was 15 minutes before the bus came, so I wait on the corner to be the first one in. I wanted to grab me the front seat so that I'm comfortable with a large box of choice chocolates, luxury size, that Patricia had asked me to take home to Esme. Standing all alone on the badly lit street in the factory district, where life was limited to shunting locomotives and men on the run, I waited. Aha, here she comes, 2 lights glimmering in the distance. I must hold this large box very carefully. No, that's not the bus. Why do they put the searchlight on? It's the pickup van. I had better stand here, stay put. If I get back into the warehouse where the rehearsals are going on, they'll think I'm running away, especially with such a large parcel on me. The spotlight, the searchlight, the police van is coming up faster now. They've seen me. From out of the shadows, a voice came. Yeah, Bofana. Yes, young man. That's the voice of the African watchman who puts on when he's going to beat you up with his large stick, especially when he sees the white boss coming, when the watchman beats you up good and proper. Make it easy for the police to effect the arrest without too much struggle. Night watchman beats you up hard, flogs you down on the ground and puts his foot on your neck, and he says, Wenzani kwa mlungu? What do you want on the white man's property? Please, Nkulu, don't hit me, God of my father. What is it then? You standing outside while the others are singing inside? Explain. How can I explain to this man whose body is mutilated with tribal incisions, earlobes pierced inches across and plugged with decorative earpieces? How can I tell this vigorous weapon-wielding servant of the white man that I'm on the brink of a nervous collapse because I've been listening to my music and watch it go from black to white and now purple? The screeching brakes halt opposite me and pour out of the van. 6 young tacklers called police in khaki uniform, dynamites fitting revolvers. They shout at the night watchman, Is it all right? All right? Okay, Jim? They fling their young rugby-playing bodies in my direction and say the familiar password, Ja, jong, ja, which means declare your damned self, jong. How does one declare oneself out of withered, crumpled, shapeless, near-discolored overcoat? Out of a sleepless bundle of a jumpy mass? Frightened of your papers, which are several and none of them in order. The last time I had paid the obnoxious poll tax was 10 years ago, had refused to pay under protest, and now here were the tax gatherers confronting me at this hour of night. They came bouncing towards me. Speak fast, young. Haven't you got a blurry tongue? Where's your pass? I released one hand from the large box and whipped out of my inside pocket the little blue cards printed. Bearer is a member of the King Kong cast. Members of the South African police are kindly asked to allow him to go home after rehearsals, which usually stop around 1 o'clock a.m. Thank you. Oh God, this one is a King Kong cover. Okay, and what is it you got in the parcel, Jong? It's chocolates, boss. Chocolates for my wife. I just got them now from a friend. Oh Jesus, Pete, listen to this one. Of all my night shifts, I never met a baboon like this one. They gathered around me. Please, boss, don't break the box. Ha ha ha, until they split their sides with laughter. The monkey's got chocolates for his wife. They laughed into their big police van, and the echo drifted into the night, echoing long after they had gone. The maid is now called wife, ha ha ha, and chocolates for her. I crawled into bed beside my long-suffering wife who had not slept for many nights, exhausted with King Kong happenings. Lay on my back, gazing into the ceiling where the flickering candlelight danced ever so gently, drawing images of travel and freedom. Darling, let's try somewhere else. England, America, anywhere else on earth is better than here. So our third and last letter is a letter by two young soldiers who have run away from South Africa in the 1980s to join in exile the military wing of the African National Congress, which was the main liberatory party of the time. And they are in training in another part of the African continent to train to be armed soldiers who would fight against the apartheid state. This letter is a really sweet and beautiful letter, but it's also quite heartbreaking in that the two young lovers are at pains in their letter where they ask the sort of head of the military wing for permission to marry. They're at pains to argue that their love will not get in the way of the revolution.
To Comrade Jackie Murage, Administrative Coordinator, Dakawa. Dear Comrade Jackie, we, Walter Mbofu and Esther Mokhale, as members of the ANC, would kindly appreciate consideration, for we wish to inform you that ours is a long and standing wish that we want to get married. Therefore, we shall be very much pleased if only you can grant us permission to do so. Perhaps, Comrade Jackie, for convenience sake, you wish to know how old we are. Myself, Walter Mbofu, I'm 31 years old. My would-be wife, Esther Mokhale, is 25 years old. Comrade Jackie, we are making this application based here in Dakawa, Tanzania. Comrade Jackie, perhaps you may wonder as to why we are planning into this. Well, we want to marry simply because we are madly in love with each other. We happen to have proved that factor through thick and thin. To illustrate on this question, we think it is imperative to bring to your attention that it is not out of excitement or out of lack of maturity that we today find ourselves wanting to marry, but it is out of rich experience about love from its preliminary stage to its highest that this long-cherished wish has got to be placed in its correct place. And that, Comrade Jackie, is nothing either than marriage. For we are looking forward to a happy and harmonious future. Kindly represent to you in the name of the struggle in this year of advance to people's power. Yours in the struggle, Walter Mbofu and Esther Mokhale.
So maybe just to close off, these letters are available on our website if you'd like to revisit them, and are really just archival material that kind of tracks the ways in which ordinary people have had to try and retain the powers of ordinary life despite the kind of complexities of the politics of South Africa, and the ways in which people have managed to retain some semblance of normalness and made a claim for retaining some kind of everyday existence and dignity, regardless of the petty apartheid that comes across in the excerpt of Tot Machikiza, or the more kind of large-scale violence that is evident in young people taking up arms against the state, but falling in love nonetheless. And we really find these kinds of letters, these kinds of archives really fascinating for thinking through the ways in which we might think about politics in South Africa. But more broadly, I think these kinds of things relate to stories across the world, and are often stories that don't factor in the big politics of the world, but remain vital in how we kind of make ourselves human in the context of these large COVID-19 pandemics or major political systems. And so that's why we wanted to share them with you.
Yeah, we know it's a lot to take in, so I will welcome any questions from YouTube and from the other presenters, just to kind of give a bit more rounded idea of our context and some of these letters.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks ever so much. Sorry I had to leave just to say goodbye to Ahmed, who's just headed off. We've just shared your website on YouTube, and we might get a couple of questions from there. One thing I was going to mention was obviously archives are something that artists do work with. And I'm really interested about how you're kind of looking for love in the archives, maybe, and how, I don't know, like I know a lot of artists work with archives and seek to create different kinds of archive or find new meanings within archives. So I just wondered if one, just kind of what it's kind of like trying to find love in the archives, but also two, kind of, I guess, whether, obviously this is a sort of an approach, a research-based approach that you kind of use. Have you got kind of thoughts to share about, I guess, what we can do with archives in new kind of ways, or what interests you about that?
We do work extensively with archives, even though it's not something that is very much foregrounded in our practice. So one of the things that we really appreciate about working with archives is actually historicizing everyday Black life. So very often we kind of speak about Black practices perpetually, like in the contemporary sense. And for us to go back into archives and dig up some of these letters was part of that process, to actually show that we're working within a trajectory and a lineage of thought, and that actually these practices have been there for so long, but actually have either been invisibilized or completely overlooked. To the question about searching for Black love, to look in the formal archives for a lot of the things that we look for, whether it be love, whether it be gardening, is near impossible. Very often we come up short, and we often have to look around the thing that we're actually looking for. So instead of like looking for, Black people in their gardens, we'll have to kind of come up with other sort of search terms to actually find the images we're looking for. Also, we work extensively with our own sort of personal family archives and the archives of like a broader network of people within a community of practice.
Yeah, part of our interest on that is also the fact that archives are usually histories of big stories often, and not the small, ordinary, everyday life stories. And particularly for people who've been kept out of the archives in many ways, those stories can be very difficult to find. So for example, we have been searching for archives of Black gardening in Nottingham, and really struggling to find that, which we weren't particularly surprised, because we struggled to find Black gardening in South Africa, where of course we're the majority. And it is because these are assumed topics that are not important. Love too is a topic that's considered not particularly important. So where you might find a lot of archives about big political figures, and you might be able to kind of find archives about big political moments, little letters from couples asking for permission to get married are quite difficult to find, and it takes a lot of searching to kind of get into those. We also have a lot of interest and have worked on other projects that are interested in other ways of memorializing and memory. So we're really interested in oral histories, and how oral histories often represent those everyday, ordinary people's stories in ways that the kind of big, more sort of Western influenced narratives of national archives or memorials in your central square kind of don't really capture everyday people's stories.
Thank you. I really like the idea. Well, I'm really interested in this sort of, the kind of like, what's the word, oblique kind of searching for one thing, trying to find another. It's really interesting. I've just got a question come from YouTube from Becky, who says, she says, thank you both. She says, was it always the case that those involved with the organised struggle had to ask for permission for these aspects of their personal life?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually.
Yeah, I wouldn't know the history of that, but
well, the one thing we do know is that so in South Africa we have a kind of form of bride price, called lobola, well, lobola among some, And we do know that in the early years of young people leaving the country to be in exile, that in fact the African National Congress even paid lobola for couples because their families, they would have been separated from their families and not able to pay for those kinds of costs. So the within the exile environments, there was definitely a kind of almost paternal and familial role that the political party starts to play. For the young people who are in this letter, this is post-1976, and in 1976, there's this mass flood of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds leaving the country to become armed soldiers. And so in that case, a political party sort of takes on all these children. And so also, again, kind of takes on this sort of paternal role. So we wouldn't know necessarily if they had to ask, but we do have some sense of the kind of familial role that emerges out of the specific context of that time.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from within Zoom? Our mini Zoom audience, as well as on. Sorry, and also I'm really sorry for my brain if my face is doing this quite a lot because I'm looking at different screen sorts we're going. It's divided attention. Oh, he's got.
Just really quickly, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the presentation. I kind of was wondering whether you thought about the material, the letters or the archival material as one thing having a primacy over the other. So whether one is illustrative or what the relationship is between the other in terms of how much they can represent an experience, and whether like sort of the letter is an adequate way of representing a certain kind of experience, or the archival material is an adequate way of representing an experience, or whether they're both somehow sort of, there is an impossibility there to adequately represent experience, but putting them together creates this kind of really interesting friction for me, or opposition. And I was wondering what you thought. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had very similar questions. The letters were actually included in an exhibition that we did on this project that I mentioned, Corner Loving. And we included the letters actually because the original form that we used, which was a set of kind of CAD drawings of corners, we didn't feel sort of captured the tenderness and love that we were trying to address, and fell maybe into some of the tropes that happen in contemporary art of kind of distance observation as opposed to really dealing with the humanness of people's lives. And so we used archival letters, but we also commissioned some sort of fictional writers to also try and do that. We're quite interested in the interplay between fact, history, and fiction, and how those spaces kind of flow. But actually still felt that the project as a whole really struggled to do exactly what you're talking about. And we wrote a text which is available also on our website called Ways of Speaking, which is about the difficulties of actually articulating and finding language to talk about something like Black love, which in many ways has been invisibilized and doesn't have a language for itself. So yeah, I think we resonate very much with that question.
I almost feel like when you read it, that person embodies that. I don't know, I'm quite interested in narration because I think there's something so powerful about that in terms of if you get something that's a written text or a poem or a segment of something, and how it's human, you know, there's an interaction there that kind of is embodied. I think that Black love is something embodied. It's not, you can't really put your finger on it necessarily as a particular thing, you know, or it looks like a certain way, or it speaks like a certain way, or it has a sense like a certain way, you know. I think that it's so, yeah, it's so intuitive and very, yeah, and yeah, very close to, I think, you know, yeah, I think it's quite reductive to in some way to like you're saying, you get into these tropes of, if you try and present Black life within just a particular format, it doesn't really, it's so complicated, it can't really hold it in a sense of like that one material, of that one piece of work or whatever it is. And so I think that sometimes you can kind of simplify these experiences in a way that feels quite, I don't know. It's like how do you justify something like that? How do you really bring it to connect? How do you get people to connect with that kind of material? And so, I just said it's not really a question, but more of a reflection. But I think that it's really important to me, with whatever is being shown, to have like this very human connection to it. Because I think sometimes Black life is subjected to the non-human and to an object, subjected to just a body, and you forget there's actually life in that body. These are people, these are individuals, and I think that it's kind of, especially with race, I think especially it's kind of just it's a grouping of people that doesn't really reflect these individual lived experiences or these nuances that I think sometimes actually, but language has a nuance because the way people talk and communicate in a way is quite interesting. So even though, maybe you can't really bring out what that is, but I think that just the little differences between how people write or how people communicate is something's there, Anyway, reflections.
Absolutely. Actually, maybe just as a last point, the two commissioned texts were by two queer writers based here in Johannesburg who wrote the most amazing texts. And one of the things that was really powerful was these languages that are completely untranslatable, just little terms that people use, but which became very powerful in the exhibition itself, where we had used them in the notations on the CAD drawings. And people were like physically reacting when they came into the exhibition and read these notations, and particularly these kind of slang words or words like we didn't even know how to spell because they're not words that are usually written down. And people seeing these words, kind of speaking them out phonetically and recognizing them and recognizing themselves in those words was really beautiful.
I also think it's quite interesting that you pick up on the disembodiment and embodiment aspect of the exhibition. So like, as Malimo mentioned, we had one aspect which was these CAD drawings. And the function of these CAD drawings was actually to kind of capture the practice of corner loving, like all the subconscious like calculations that people are making in order to meet in these corners. And one of the things that we wanted to do is to take out the Black body from those drawings. Like the first impulse is obviously to have images of Black people meeting in these corners, and by having those bodies there, again, you begin to focus very much on the sexuality of like the Black body, the hypersexuality of it. And so for us, the texts, the lecture series, and actually just the layout of the exhibition itself and how people moved through the space became a way of re-embodying that body, but like in ways that weren't sexualized, but actually could speak to tenderness, the cadence, of like Black love, narration, as you're saying, kind of just carries something quite beautiful. So I think it's quite interesting that you picked that up.
Sorry, messing up my tech there. Thank you. I think that's a really great note to end on. And I'm thrilled as well that this is just the beginning of hopefully hearing more from both of you as you kind of progress your relationship with primary. And and hopefully maybe there'll be another talk along the way as part of the programme and stuff. So again, just a big thanks for I know that you haven't seen each other during lockdown either, or seen each other for quite a while, and you've come together to do your talk tonight, which is really nice. Just ideas about people coming close or being together is really nice. So thank you. I'm just keeping up on. I messed up my YouTube, but it's back on. I think we're good to thank you again. I think we're going to move on to Kim, who has been been listening throughout. Thank you for hanging on. Yeah, do you need to share your screen or anything?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay.
No, it's all good.
Cool. Okay. Great. So if any other questions do come up, do pop them in the YouTube chat, and we'll pass them on to people. Yeah, I'll just let you. Oh, who's speaking? No. No. Okay. I thought I'd messed it up then. My thing froze. Okay, Kim, I'll let you get on. Thanks.
No problem. I guess first thing I wanted to say thank you to everyone for this evening. I really enjoyed what everyone was talking about, the different subject materials. I mean, for me, it was very meaningful to hear with a lot of what people were saying, especially obviously regarding race, which is what I wanted to kind of touch on as well. From a personal aspect, I suppose, during this whole critical climate, I guess I was looking inwards as a woman of colour and trying to, I guess, come forward into having conversations with not only friends but family as to what it is to be a woman of colour, but not only with Black heritage, but with Asian heritage, and being, you know, part of both worlds. I have to hold them in the same regard. And everything that was focused on during the pandemic, obviously given to certain events that happened, which were really sad, I then had to kind of question as to how my Asian counterpart was playing into this role as well. Because it's very easy for me to, you know, obviously stand as a Black woman and with the peers that I, you know, surround myself with and my family, into accepting those struggles. But I have to also identify with struggling as an Asian woman as well. And I've been reading a lot during this time, you know, spending a lot of time poring through a lot of material. And one specific book that I kind of poured through, which I don't know if you've ever come across it, but it's a photographer called Jimmy Nelson. There's a smaller version of this, by the way. This is a huge book, but it's basically about Indigenous tribes around the world. It's called Before They Pass Away. He spent quite some time traveling the world into many different corners and areas, interviewing and documenting Indigenous tribes. And I found it fascinating, obviously, because you kind of forget, and it's very easy to forget these different communities that are still existing, you know, on this earth. And being a tribal person myself, I then thought, actually, why aren't we included in this book? And it wasn't this kind of jealousy or envy. It was more, I didn't understand, because as far as I know, and witnessing it and looking into my own family demographic, the tribe's dying out. Because as in the Philippines, we are being steadily, you know, more modernized, Americanized. These whole, you know, daily rituals of looking on your phone and behaving in this very tech-heavy way, my younger cousins and the younger generation of our family are forgetting traditions and culture. So it's almost like how I was raised, how my mum was raised, and obviously her mum was raised. Everything that has been passed down to celebrate is filtering out, and it makes me really sad. So I wondered if there was a way that, not Jimmy Nelson in particular, but if anyone was going to come across and try to document other tribal or clan-like, you know, traditions or behaviors before they do completely disappear. It's really difficult to talk to a lot of my friends in my upbringing because it's such a world away. And having grown up there, and even though I was visiting England to and fro, I didn't really move back until I was 10. And so my childhood was spent in outdoor areas where no one locked their door, no one had CCTV. You know, as long as you were in some sort of vicinity, it was safe. It's still safe now, I guess. But having that kind of massive divide when then living in the UK, where everyone's very staunch, everyone closes their curtains at night and locks everything and double locks and everything's double glazing, this kind of reinforced security made me question my trust in the community I was growing up in. And so then there's this kind of imbalance as to, do I trust my life here versus do I trust my clan life? And I think that's where I then question my own privilege. I've been very lucky to have grown in a developing country in the Far East, as well as then growing here in my teens in a developed country, and then having the experience of both to then try and develop my own core opinion as to how I feel I would love the world to be socially equal. But it's easy for me to say that because I've come from two different worlds and I'm able to merge them together. And it's been this weird struggle during the pandemic in trying to understand existence. And I know that sounds quite heavy, because I feel that everyone is probably going through this. You know, it's been a very weird and strange time where we're all questioning what's happening. Like it's terrifying and it's scary and it's very, I guess this sounds awful, but Hollywood. And then trying to find a kind of realistic aspect about it, you have to then delve into your past to then find understanding as to your now. So with that, kind of delving back into clan and tribal history and how life is like in the Philippines compared to here, I always regard the Philippines as home. Even though I've definitely lived here much longer now, it's always going to be home for me. And I don't know whether that's, I always regard my mother as being where home is. And she's been stuck there since January. And even though, you know, we've had online conversations and such, having her being on the other side of the world, and the signal is very poor because we come in the mountain region. So I'm Benguet based. It's the north of the Philippines. It's about 6 hours drive to the nearest airport. And then about 10 hours drive to Manila. So we're very far away from the capital. We're quite remote as places go. And she's been there since January. And as fun as it was to begin with, because I was to follow suit and to go over in March as well. Obviously, we went into lockdown and everything shut down. I guess I was kind of mildly grateful because staying within your own home always just seems to be a bit safer anyway, rather than traveling and such. I've built up this weird sense of loss, because when you're cooped up so much within your dwellings, even though it does feel safe, I feel there is an element of possibly losing sight of yourself or your worth or what it is that you value. And you can only base it on the forms of social media and having to express yourself on that. However, I'm not that, you know, inclined to just spout everything. But having these kind of conversations with friends and family, you kind of, I mean, maybe it's just me, but you wonder how different things could be, you know, if and should and woulda, coulda. And I feel that if I was there in the Philippines and this lockdown happened, what would we be doing? And I kind of thought, I would be outside the entire time. I know it's way more stricter over there compared to our situation here. It's been, I guess, more heavily respected by the community and by society in the Philippines compared to people's behavior here. But I guess that's possibly a cultural thing. But I know that I would be outside because there's a bit more space there. And I wondered as well that obviously with being around family and tradition and tribal rituals and such, I probably wouldn't be as tech heavy either. I would take time to be me and to be within the family unit. And that's not to say that, you know, we would throw flamboyant kind of cultural practices. Say, for instance, we have a celebration or a celebratory event called Kanyao, which means it normally lasts about 2 to 3 weeks. We kind of call upon to our ancestors and the spirits to kind of watch over and join the celebration with us into either, you know, enjoying a new birth in the family or a wedding or someone traveling away or a new job. It could be any form of excuse really to celebrate. And that's not to say that we would do that because it is still a critical climate and that would be respectful. But I don't doubt that the elders in my family would throw Kanyao to be celebratory for us being together in a family unit, which is hard to do, I guess, over here when you're constantly fed. You have to be X amount of space away from each other. You know, do not see your own family. You cannot go to a funeral. You cannot do this, and that is so hard. I can't imagine what people have had to go through during this time. And I guess in this kind of backward manner, I've really appreciated where I've come from, because even though I feel miles away from home, I can still enjoy a certain element of it, whether that's through a TV screen or through nostalgia or through memoir or through the things I have in my home and pictures and things. I guess you always kind of carry that with you. And I would love it for people to always remember that just because you're not home doesn't mean that it's not there, like it always exists. And you can always return to it at a later stage. It doesn't have to be now, or, you know, you don't have to set a time frame, but you always have like a route to go to, you know. Probably sounds really cheesy. But that's just a lot of things that I've been reflecting on. And I really just thought as well, because I'm an artist, that perhaps I should devote a series of work towards it. And I'm kind of struggling with the concept at the moment, but I almost thought these kind of totem beings dressed up in different kind of tribal wear from my region. So I'm Bontoc and Burakai. And it sounds awful. It's not like this anymore, but Bontoc is basically head bringers. We're not like that anymore. And Burakai are peacekeepers. So it's quite funny that my grandparents met being very angry and violent versus peacemakers, but sure, there's a nice balance now. But I thought it'd be really cool to represent each area of the mountains in some sort of art form, to represent my culture, because harking back way to the beginning, I'm just scared of it disappearing and dying out, and I kind of want to show some sort of pride into, you know, my heritage. And I've always done that with my Black heritage. And this sounds awful, but I guess it's easier to do that when that's the initial attack, when someone sees you, and that's the appearance and judgment and assumption that they make, is that, oh, because you are dark skinned, therefore you are this. I then feel I should also bring my Asian roots forward to the same level and protect them both equally. Yeah, I feel like I've waffled on so much. Yeah.
No, you haven't at all. It's great. And just to reflect back to you, when we first talking about what you were going to talk about, and you were kind of like, you had a few ideas and you were like, this is really important, I need to talk about this. And actually kind of the way you've ended up is like you kind of connected it back to you and what you do, which is really great, and which is where we began kind of talking and like imagining what your version of this melding is and like how you can express it. Like that's kind of where you've ended up, which is really good. I hope that's a really good place to have ended up after sharing this. And I don't know, it's a personal thing, and so thank you. I wondered if anyone had any kind of follow-up questions, I guess, as well, like as people trying to think about, I know we don't kind of, one of the things we don't do is kind of like talk at length about our work, but we obviously are all involved in kind of processes of research on like different levels. So I wondered if that feels like that touches on a number of things. I don't know if people had follow-up questions. I'm just going to check in YouTube about, because to see if anyone has any thoughts in there as well. I
mean, I guess that I'm quite relieved that I did change the subject material, because then I feel like it was obviously more fitting with what people were talking about. It would have been horrendous if I spouted down this whole computer gaming route.
I love the computer gaming route, honestly. Like, I think that, but also this is the thing about kind of like, as I said, like I feel that's also uniquely you, and that you have your own connections to it, and you tell your own story, or your own kind of, you have your own take on that as well. So like, that would be equally interesting. So and as we say, like there's no kind of hierarchy of information or knowledge or stuff, but yeah, I'm delighted that you shared. Anyone got any follow-up thoughts or questions for Kim? I wondered, just a kind of more, oh yeah, sorry, go for it.
I would love to hear more about the computer gaming route.
See, I told you.
That's so funny. I mean, I guess that we could really delve into that. It would probably take too long, but can
you explain what you were going to talk about?
Yeah, sure. I guess that was the other thing that was connecting with this whole kind of pandemic vibe, is that as a form of escapism, you know, dealing with like mental health or bullying or things like that from a very young age of, you know, like I think 10, when I came back here, I just got so caught up in gaming, because it was just this extension of, I could pour myself into something and create a character and no one could harm me, because I would do everything within my effort to have the highest stats and win the game. So it's almost like this level of protection. And the game that I was going to talk about is called Baldur's Gate 2. It's a PC game, and I guess what I was going to delve into about is this form of inventory managing. Like, I think it's really easy to, you know, when you don't have enough time to do all of these things within your home, all of a sudden when you have infinite amount of time, you find yourself like nitpicking at things, or just kind of giving yourself really strange tasks. And I feel like there's a form of that within gaming, that you kind of stray off of the main storyline, and you're more concerned about your inventory management. So, you know, you might go into your bag of holding, and before you know it, you've got 30 extra potions here and a magic book over here. Your spell book is full. Like, it was just ridiculous. Like, yeah, I think that's completely separate, and I could really talk about that at length, but I'm not going to, because otherwise we won't get off here until 2 a.m. Yeah.
Maybe just to add that it would be really interesting to kind of hear you explore the connection between the two, because
yeah, sure.
I mean, maybe at first thought they're completely separate, but I think there are a lot of connections there. a number of really interesting gamers here who work through a kind of digital festival here, and I've worked a lot on kind of thinking about gaming that represents these kinds of multiple identities around gender and race.
Yeah, sure. I do find myself playing a lot of games that are RPG based, or like a sense of adventure, and you know, it sounds snobbish, but to have an environment where, you know, the landscape is insane and you kind of just go off on an adventure and you can get lost to it. So I guess more open world playing, and that probably stems back then to my form of my childhood where I'm outdoors all the time. And you know, I'm playing Death Stranding at the moment, which is a very like isolated game where you're technically a dystopian postman. But yeah, the landscape's pretty desolate. You're very much alone. I kind of wonder how that ties in with the pandemic and me thinking I can't see anyone, so I'm just gonna add that even more and be a bit extra and do that on screen. Like, what is that? So yeah, there must be some form of connection, especially as a teenager. Like when you just play angsty games all the time, like a lot of fighting, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, Streets of Rage, like all these kinds of, you know, like fighting games, and you just think that's your pent up energy where you're just like, smash, you know, Hulk, and that all died away. As much as I could play that now, there's not that kind of release that you could do when you were a teenager. I guess now it is, it's just a bit more Marie Kondo-esque and inventory management, or rolling up into the landscape, or looking at beautiful creatures. I mean, okay, I have a phone game called Harvest Town. I've been fishing for weeks. I'm not doing anything else. That's awful. What am I doing? There's definitely connections.
I guess it's also like really interesting with the way that those landscapes in some games also often feel like the frontier, or there's like, it's this kind of there's this kind of almost colonial move, or the kind of domination of land. It's often barren land. And it just feels like, the kind of the beauty of it, or the going fishing, feels really interesting. It feels like a different way of looking at that kind of landscape. Maybe that isn't about that. I don't know.
No, that's really interesting that you said that, actually, to do with the whole colonization thing, because then, you know, I don't know how much you guys play, but when you first enter a map sequence, you're only showed X amount of the map until you reach either a certain level and you unlock the entire map to see, or you have to explore. And I guess then therefore lies this either level of curiosity or a form of colonization where you're just like, right, I need to take that land now because I need to know what's there. And that's a bit dark, but it's interesting. I'm gonna have to think more about that.
I'm just gonna share some comments from YouTube. There's a lot of response to the mention of inventories.
Oh wow!
Just feel I should say that. Niall says you can never have too much inventory management. Ben also agrees with that. Can't stand not knowing where things are. Simon says he's really enjoyed the talks. Emily's been obsessed with sandbox games in lockdown, administrative fun. Becky's pointed out the connection between how Larry Achampong talks about gaming, him and his gaming. So he did a talk called Geekhood, My Son and I, which was part of Tell Me Something a couple of years ago. And that was very much like it was both tracking his own development as an artist, but also along with gaming and kind of how that fitted in his life, but then in his work as well. So which is really, really, really interesting, and the different perspectives on games from that. So I mean, we've kind of come full circle. Like all the ends have been tied up. All the ideas we talked about, they've been stitched together. I feel like bird watching is akin to fishing a little bit there, Hugh. So that's kind of connected up as well. I have done a terrible job at like keeping to time, but I haven't cared because it's been so enjoyable, and you know, I'm in charge, so I decide where we stop. So yeah, lots of thank yous in the chat. Just to mention as well that this will be up tomorrow with captions, or as soon as we can do it with captions. And we are exploring BSL signing and live captioning for future events. Anybody got any kind of final thoughts? No.
I don't think so.
Cool. I feel like there was just such a neat ending there that was so good. Some waves and more thank yous on YouTube. Thank you from me to you all, and thank you to Ahmed and Henry. Just to sort of mention, we're going to be staying in touch with Henry and Ahmed about small food and how that develops, and just yeah, keeping up with how Ahmed's getting on as well. So you know, as Jade mentioned, these kind of connections with people don't begin and end necessarily with a talk here. You know, it's kind of ongoing. So thank you to Emily in the chat. Oh my God, it feels like an award show. Thanks to Emily. Thanks to you all. Emily's been looking after the chat. Thanks for Jade for doing tech stuff with me earlier when we absolutely nailed and Emily, the Zoom YouTube connection stuff. So yeah, I'm going to shut up now and I'm going to sign off. Thank you again to everyone.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll see all of you soon. Yeah.
Bless up, innit? Bless up.
I'll see you all and be in touch with you all again soon. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.